Hi, this is Federal Defense Attorney John Teakell, and I'm here to talk to you about healthcare fraud prosecutions in federal court. Healthcare fraud is what it says, healthcare fraud, and there's specifically a statute in federal court that makes healthcare fraud a crime, and it's used in indictments called healthcare fraud. But there are several categories of healthcare fraud that people talk about or categorize when they're describing healthcare fraud, and let's talk about those. For a brief description of those, there's Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, sometimes referred to as insurance fraud, where there's overcharging for services or unnecessary services that are given or unnecessary prescriptions that are given. There's what's called overbilling or code manipulation. That's charging for services not given, or upcoding, that is claiming different codes so you can get a higher reimbursement than what you actually did as far as the medical service. Pill mills are sometimes referred to as part of the healthcare fraud. That's where you have pain medication doctors who are overprescribing or prescribing pain medications that are not medically necessary. Internet pharmacies, where you have online medications that are dispensed without valid prescriptions. Prescription fraud, basically you have forged prescriptions and altered prescriptions where you may have a legitimate prescription for a pain medication or some other medication, but yet you take the number on there after you have the legitimate prescription and you alter it so the pharmacist will give you more than the doctor authorized. Now, as I stated, healthcare fraud is a charge specifically by itself. There's a specific statute called healthcare fraud. And also in federal court, the U.S. Attorney may charge some sort of healthcare fraud as a conspiracy to commit fraud. Other charges that you might find in healthcare fraud investigation would be identity theft, money laundering, distribution of controlled substances by some healthcare worker who is not authorized to do so. Now, these translate into real scenarios where you have healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, home healthcare providers, people like this who are investigated for the upcoding, charging for services not rendered, charging for equipment or prescriptions that never were given to the patient. All of these things are real scenarios where you have a healthcare fraud investigation and prosecution by the federal prosecutor. Now, these, of course, are in federal court where you have the sentencing guidelines, which means that it is a serious charge to begin with, but with the sentencing guidelines, it's a point system that you don't find in state court, where you have more activity, the more serious events, the more points that are assessed to the defendant. The higher the points, the higher the imprisonment recommendation range. So it's a serious charge and can result in harsh penalties in federal court, unlike state court where sometimes you can walk in and just negotiate probation. So you need a serious attorney, a well-experienced and experienced attorney who is used to these types of charges. If you have an investigation or know someone who's under investigation or who's been charged with a healthcare fraud, have them call me, John Teakell, and I'll be glad to guide them through it. Thank you.